Welcome back to the Survivor edition of Why Blank Lost. I'm David Bloomberg, and ever since I retired from that other job I had, when people ask me what I do, I have to say I'm an effing podcast host.
My goodness.
Joining me, of course, is my effing co-host, who still has an important day job, Jessica Lewis.
Hello. Yes, I do. I do still have my day job. Thank you very much. And I am also an effing podcaster as well. So thank you so much for joining us again. And we do have a special guest joining us today. This is
That's
so
right.
exciting.
Helping us to welcome Survivor back into our lives once again is Jessica's former winner pick, Survivor 45's Jake O'Kane.
Hey, what's going on? This is just an formal apology to Jess that I lost Survivor.
No, I need to apologize to you because the butterfly effect. I chose you. You didn't win. It's my fault. I'm sorry.
So
oh, yes,
good.
I'm definitely
Well, what the hell, Jess?
I
know. Whoa. I mean,
Whoa.
Now we know why this happened. Oh, yes. No, I was so excited to choose you as my winner, even though I understand the ramifications that can have. But it was great watching you. You were incredible television, awesome player. So I'm so excited to have you here because this is going to be a lovely time. I'm very much looking forward to this. So again, I apologize for the negative effect I've had on your life. However, let's move forward and let's just do this podcast and everything will be great.
I'm excited. I'm excited.
Yeah, Jake, we met, of course, at the Chicago RHAP event last season. We were at the Cubs game, and I was looking away from where you were. You were coming to your seats, and then I heard your voice, and I immediately turned around. And I was like, "That's Jake." So, how have you been doing?
I've been good, man. This just grinding away at work, enjoying Survivor 47 for the one episode that's been on. And you guys are getting the last podcast from Grandma's house. I think this is the last podcast here. So, the pink walls are going to be substituted out.
Oh man.
I do. Right. I do appreciate the fact that you were ending on a high note with us. I love that.
Oh yeah.
So, thank you.
No problem.
All right. Well, I know that a lot of people said they were surprised at the outcome this first week, but I have to tell you, as I was watching, it was somewhat obvious to me that Andy wasn't going after everything that happened in the challenge, in part because it was too obvious. It was one of those things where it's like, well, this person is clearly going, and you're watching going, no, they're not. And if it wasn't going to be Andy, there seemed to only be one other likely suspect. Also, while I didn't notice until my rewatch, there were two big hints in scenes where the camera focused on Jon as Jeff was talking about someone being in trouble. I ended up making a video that people can check either in the patron group or on my YouTube or TikTok. You just see it focused right on him. And then, of course, there's also people have pointed out, he had the episode title of One Glorious Day on Survivor or whatever it was, One Glorious Episode.
Oh, yes.
So there were a lot of hints being dropped in that episode.
Maybe they were trying to make people understand it because I do think there is a lot to unpack here, though.
Oh,
I really do.
Yeah. And we will get to that. Now, I know that there are probably some new listeners, thanks to Asia's Rob Has a Podcast shout out on the show. For all of you, let me briefly explain what we do here because it's a bit different from your typical recap podcast. Each week, we compare what the player who's voted out did in the game to my rules for winning that I originally wrote way back after season 1 and have been updating ever since, using all the non-spoiler information available to us from what we saw on TV, interviews, social media, and secret scenes. What we often find is the basic reasons given on TV, or sometimes even by the players themselves in interviews, may not tell the whole story. And there's rarely one particular action that caused them to get voted out, but rather a bigger series of actions or events that led to it. For anyone who's interested, the newest version of the rules can be found by going to our website page, robhaswebsite.com/yxlostfeed, and clicking on the link bubble for the Survivor rules. Now, I mentioned the Asia's shout out, and it did remind me of way back when Sheehan quoted my Rule 2 in her final words back in Survivor
Yes.
Thailand. Except
Mhm.
she didn't say my name or the name of my website at the time, so people didn't even know it was a shout out. It was so I
We
didn't
knew.
get that good advertising pop, you know?
Yeah, but we knew. We were there with
That's right.
you.
That's right. Uh, before we address how Jon did in terms of the rules, we always have some other things to discuss from the episode. And I think it makes sense to start with our 2 winner picks. Now, Jake, I'm not sure. Did you make a preseason winner pick?
I did make a preseason winner pick. My can I share that? Is this
Sure.
Oh,
from time?
yes.
I picked Tiana. I
Okay.
I'm a little biased. Tiana was the 45 alt when she didn't get on the boat with us that day. I was
Oh,
floored
okay.
personally. I didn't expect Tiana to be the alt, and I was like, oh, that's so sad. She seemed like such a
So can
cool
I ask you a
person.
question about that?
Yeah.
Did you know that there was alternates there, or did you just assume everyone was going to be going out to play?
Oh no. I knew there would be an alternate there,
Okay.
and like Austin was the other alternate, and
Mhm.
but not too much inside baseball, but someone left, and we're like, all
Yeah.
right, well, there's not another. All the men are playing at
Yeah.
this point.
Yeah, okay. Well,
But
I
yeah, I was
see, that
surprised.
is fascinating because when I went out for my season, there was
Hmm.
20 of us. So it was like, well, either we're all playing or they do have 2 alternates, but it was one of those. I was just curious, like how that ends up playing out when there are actual alternates, like they just don't get on the boat. That's so sad.
Yeah. I think Rachel was an alternate for 46, I believe.
Yes.
She's the female.
Yes.
Yeah, but you hang out there, it's like, oh my god, I would hate that. I would lose my mind. Hey,
Yeah.
don't talk for a week, and you likely or may not do this thing. But I mean, now where you've had Austin and Gio get subbed in last minute, like
Yeah. Wasn't
not
wasn't
that bad.
wasn't Kelly an alternate originally?
Kelly was an alternate on
Yeah.
43. Yeah.
Yeah.
Kelly and Gio were the alternates on 43. Gio
Yeah.
got to go.
Yeah.
It's so crazy. I'd be
Yeah.
like tripping people in the bathroom or something. Be like, "Oops, oh my god, I'm so sorry."
Nancy Nancy Kerrigan over here, or the opposite, doing a
Kidding.
Nancy
No,
Kerrigan.
really, I'm not that kind of person. I'm just
Yeah.
kidding. But
Yeah.
that
But I'd do
would
it.
be a very that would be you're like, wow, we seem to have lost someone. Anyone know where they could be? They're like, like tucked away somewhere. Yeah, no, that would be a very, very hard thing to go
Yeah.
through, to be
Yeah.
like present for
Yeah.
that entire time. Yeah.
Jessica, you're a criminal prosecutor. You know how to make it look like an accident. You know?
Let's not go down there. I might have seen a few things that people have done now and again, but I'm not telling anyone to do these things. Please
Yeah.
don't. Please
Yeah.
don't.
Yeah.
I should change the subject. I'm so sorry for going down this path. Do not
Oh,
injure other
all
people
right.
to get on Survivor, okay? Just
Yeah.
don't do it.
Yeah. So what's funny about that Jessica and I had Asia and Rome as our winner picks, because
Mhm.
the 2 of them immediately went head to head, basically.
Yeah.
In the first few minutes, Rome criticized Asia for
Yeah.
volunteering to go compete for camp supplies
Mhm.
because it could weaken her position. Now, this is something, by the way, I do want to mention. I've listened to some other podcasts already, and they were like, well, when Asia volunteered, she knew this or knew that. But from what we saw, all Jeff said was something like, all I'm telling you is you're getting camp supplies. They did not know it was a head-to-head competition. They did not know what they were going to have to do. I'm
Mhm.
not even sure they knew they were going to have to leave for an extended time.
Yeah, there was very little information provided, but I still would have leaned more towards I'm not going, because this is, and I feel like Asia talked about this in her pregame press, where she didn't want to be the person that was going on, and maybe I'm just remembering
Well, that was
incorrectly, but there
that was
there
for
was a lot.
journeys, I think.
Well, but still, I mean,
Yeah.
I feel like I would equate this to like a journey, because
Yeah.
this is the
Yeah.
first day. You've just met everyone. I would not want any time away from my tribe mates immediately, because that's when people are bonding. You're getting to know who you're going to
Mhm.
be on a
Yep.
tribe with. I'm not leaving. Nope. Anyone else can go. That's fine. I'm staying with the tribe. So I can understand that position for sure.
I think it would be interesting. I tend to agree with don't go if you can.
Mhm.
But if there's pressure, I don't think make a whole thing about it. Because the
Right.
thing is, if you
Sure,
go,
sure.
it's I don't think it helps you in the game socially. I think it is recoverable. I don't think I did that when I went in Sweat and Savvy, but it's kind of like the position where I think the logic would be don't go, but if you're in a situation like Voce, right? I think you have to go. I think if you're going to get pushed in that
Mm-hmm.
Right.
situation, or like
Sure.
when it personally happened with me when Bella was trying to figure out who's going to go do Sweat and Savvy, Brando said, "I'm going immediately." And then we're like, "Oh, it's Sweat or Savvy. Like we're going to need someone strong." And I'm like, "Oh, how about Bruce? He was in the military." He's like, "Man, that was 20 years ago." Oh no, like that ain't me. And I was like, "You literally just did the strength portion of this challenge.
Right,
What the
right.
fuck?"
Like,
Like,
hi.
and so then Kendra's like, "I'll go," and I'm like, "Oh, this is not
Yeah.
gonna look good," because like the narrative coming off 44 was that all the women went early, so it's like I don't
Right.
want to like poke my head up, you know what I mean? So
Yeah.
Yeah.
I ended up going, but I think Rome's correct. I don't think he's right on everything else that goes down in the
Yeah.
following 2
Well,
hours.
yeah.
But I think the
But
logic, if you can not go, don't.
yeah,
I agree.
I will
Mhm.
be interested in Asia's winter interviews, to hear what
Mhm.
her logic was for deciding to go.
Sure, sure.
But,
Mhm.
And then I'll be interested to hear Rome's winner interviews about why he was
yeah,
right
well,
about that decision that she made being wrong. Look, this is how he became my winner pick, Jake. I picked a rock.
That's policy. But I love rocks. Sorry. We may have different opinions of this, but it looks like you've embraced it.
I finally did. I said, you
Yeah.
know what? Let's just move past this. Rocks can be my friend. And so Rome is now my winner pick rock.
Yes. Well, we'll see if it becomes
And
your friend, but
listen, we know how Jessica's winner picks
that's
go.
true.
Again, I'm sorry, Jake.
That's true because so Rome goes from criticizing Asia for doing something that could put her in a bad position, and then runs off to look for the idol, which he admits could put him in a bad position.
Yeah, he's
Um,
aware at least. He's
yeah,
aware.
he's aware, but he still did it. Uh,
Sure.
and then Asia led the tribe search squad as they looked for him and eventually saw him running away from them.
He walked away. He did not
Okay,
run
okay.
away.
Um,
Details matter, okay?
uh,
Jeez.
so Asia quickly integrated herself back into the tribe after her unsuccessful journey, thanks in large part to Teeny, and then seemingly got the target pointed at someone else.
Yes, she did. She did.
Mm.
I'm not going to sit here and speak ill of your winner pick as you are speaking ill of mine. Everyone plays the game a little bit differently and everyone takes a little different approach.
I'm
I
not
will
speaking
say,
ill of Rome. He looks very
mm,
fun.
okay.
I will tell you a little spoiler for the end of the podcast. I will not predict that he is voted out next.
Oh, well, how kind of you. Thank you.
That is
I
thoughtful,
won't
David.
I
Yes.
won't pick Asia either. How about
Okay.
that? Anywho.
Now, speaking of Teeny, I do want to mention that in our preview podcast, I said it would be interesting to see if Teeny would pull an Izzy from last season of Big Brother and tell Asia they knew who she was,
Mm,
but would keep it totally secret. And that's exactly what happened. I mean, I wonder, I don't know. I'm going to guess that Teeny watches Big Brother also. And I wonder if that was running through their mind as they were doing this.
quite possible. But didn't
Like,
she talk about that also? Go
are
ahead,
you
Jake.
saying
I'm so
pregame
sorry.
or like, are you saying pregame or in game?
Both.
Because personally, I wouldn't have recognized Asia. Like, I listened to this stuff, but I wouldn't
Right.
have recognized her before going out. Because like now, it's a little more involved at this point. But did anyone else recognize Asia in pregame?
Andy.
Andy. Okay.
Yes.
Yes, but different
But
tribe.
I feel
Yeah.
like Teeny talked about doing like she was going to say something to her, but understood. I'm not going to tell anybody else that I
Well, and that's
recognized her.
that's
Yeah,
what
so she at least
that's
talked
what they
through it.
said in pregame, and that's
Mhm.
exactly what they said
Mhm.
to Asia
Yeah.
as
Right.
well. Was, hey, I'm not gonna say. I mean, it was almost word for word what Teeny
Mhm.
told Mike Bloom.
Yeah.
So it was
Mm.
good practice, But yeah, and that helped integrate Asia back in,
Yeah.
which I think was really good. it's interesting because a friend of mine, and I've been asked this before, but a friend of mine asked me on Facebook if I would play Survivor if they called. And I said, well, they're not going to call. But if they magically did, besides all the other reasons that they won't call, I would do it, but I would also expect, like Asia, that I'd be recognized.
Mm.
The difference is Asia is seen as much nicer than me. Uh, I'm the guy who has been telling players what they did wrong for literally decades.
Yes.
And so,
And you've sucked me into your world, Bloomberg.
yeah,
Look
and
at this.
way too many people would want to vote me out and go to the voting booth and say, and this is why David lost, with my name on the parchment there.
Just make sure
So
you wear that T-shirt when you go out on the
yeah,
island,
That would be awesome.
and everyone
So-
will know.
Oh my god.
Now, besides our 2 winner picks, there are a couple other people I want to discuss, starting with Andy. Obviously, a lot has already been said about him and what happened, so we don't need to delve further into that. He clearly had a series of bad moments of things piling on, like stress, lack of sleep, other personal stuff, and some heat exhaustion. But to me, the key is what it means for him going forward, because I've seen a fair number of people compare him to Banu. But I don't see it that way. Look at how quickly he was able to turn it around, get in with the majority to vote out Jon. And yeah, he probably just went along with what they told him. But someone like Banu would have continued breaking down at even the thought of it.
Mm.
I think Andy is someone else. And I think, Jake, you and I think, are on the same page with this.
Yeah, I think Andy gives me a lot of Emily vibes.
Yep.
Emily had a rough day one. She would tell you that. And then she goes on this great arc of becoming an increasingly better Survivor player to the point where she's a massive threat to win and has the best story of the season going into final 7 of Survivor 45. Rough start for Andy. I mean, I get that. Like, I get that. You're worried you're on the outs, especially early on. And based on the exit interviews from Jon, like, Andy had the correct read. Like, he had the correct read. Andy was being left out of stuff, and it's Survivor. There's a little learning curve at the beginning of
Oh, yes.
how do I settle into number one, being on your favorite show in the world, and number two, just the elements. And it sounds like he wasn't sleeping. Like, I was freaking out early on, but I didn't sleep too bad the first couple days. If I wasn't sleeping like Andy, who knows? But I do think, and we can get into it now, we can get into it later, but with kind of what's happened over the past couple seasons, I think Andy's actually not in the worst spot right now, as shocking as that may sound.
Yeah, I do think that those are incredibly valid points about the learning curve that you have to go through when you get out there, because it doesn't matter how many times you tell yourself, this is what I'm going to do, and this is how I'm going to do it, and this is how it's all going to be, until you're actually out on an island and it goes completely pitch black and you can't see a damn thing, and you're sleeping on bamboo that's very uncomfortable, and there's bugs and birds running through and over you, and there's crabs. Like, I mean, it is all of these things that you can't prep yourself for.
Yeah.
You can prepare for so many things, but then once you have the elements thrown at you, and there's no food and there's no water, and your body really is almost kind of in shock for a little bit. And some people adjust really well. I managed to adjust very well. There was other people on my tribe that did, but you also have to look at the amount of people that are there. I had 10 people on my tribe. He
Right.
has 6. And I do feel like having that smaller amount of people makes it that much more intense. And Jake, I'm sure you
Yeah.
can speak to this, that you notice when you're being left out that much more because there's so few people. And I mean, 10 versus 6, it's huge when you're in a tribe on an
Yeah.
island all by yourself. And so I can imagine that if you are the person that is being left out, there's a light shining on it and you can't help but miss it. And it then compounds all of these other things that you're having to deal with, knowing this is a social game that you need to play and you're being ostracized or just left out. It must be a very difficult thing to have to go through with such a smaller group of people.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I mean, like, you're analyzing each one of these 5 other people you're on a tribe with. so
Mhm.
much more in particular. And I can't speak to experience with 10 people, but I just imagine having 4 other people. It's like, oh,
Mhm.
maybe I could have misread that. It's like you got 5 people around you. You might be misreading things, but you can get the vibe. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Mhm.
But
Yeah.
I think the thing with Andy too, and I don't know if I could speak on his longevity in the game, is I think I saw some talk about Andy becoming Charlie Brown, becoming the Jake, becoming the Owen, and that could absolutely happen. But I think if he's gonna have a rough moment like this and get sank to the bottom of the totem pole really hard and be seen in the kind of way that he's being seen by his tribe right now, I think it's better that it happens now. I think if
Yeah.
there's opportunity and time, I think if it happens after the merge, I don't know how much anyone could do to bring themselves out of that
Mhm.
point. But I think
Yeah.
Andy has a lot of time. There's a lot of game. There's a lot of twists probably coming down the line. I think Andy could pull himself out of his spot.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree. All right. Well, finally, I want to mention, Jessica, you and I worried in the preseason podcast about Annika project managing.
Oh, yes.
Well, there she was. One of these
Project
perfect
managing.
people who's like, I'm not going to do this going in, and immediately
Mhm.
starts doing it.
Yes. There are certain parts of yourself that you just cannot put away when you go out there to play. And we've talked about this a lot. Like Jessica was told, put parts of yourself in a box by people that I work with. They're like, just keep Jessica in a box a little bit. And she was very aware of that portion of herself going out there, but she did not keep any of it in the box. She was like, I'm just going to take over. I'm going to tell you how you can find these particular coconuts, how we should build the shelter, and we need more bamboo and all of these things. So I do, but also there was an appreciation by other people on her tribe that she was doing that because then she's the leader and they don't have to be. So yeah, lean in on that. If someone wants to do
Mhm.
it, let them do it. Let them kind of dig their own hole if they want, and then put all the focus on them for sure.
Yeah.
I like Annika's confessions. I like Annika a lot. I thought that was a really funny scene. But I think if going down the line, like it might be helpful day one, but like
Hmm.
that can start to grate on people, and I hope for her sake it doesn't.
Then you
Yeah.
become Bruce. Yeah.
Yes.
Some people would feel that way.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't mind, that kind of person, but other people might.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Do either of you have anything or anyone else you want to discuss before we get to the rules?
I don't know. I will say one thing that my mother noted, which I thought was really quite fascinating. I missed, and this, I guess, for future Survivor players, never even thought about this. When you're doing, we didn't do a mud challenge on my season, and I kind of wish we had. It would
Oh,
have been
then you
fun.
weren't properly birthed into
Oh,
Survivor, according to
I
Jeff.
right. But my mom said that some people put their buffs over their faces and before they jumped in the mud, and I
Mhm.
didn't even notice that. I was like, that's a genius move.
The
So future
first one
Survivor players,
the
yeah,
first one that I saw do it was Sam. So I don't know if he invented it, but I commented on that on Twitter. He was the first one I saw because some of them were using
great,
it to cover other
yeah,
parts, but he literally pulled it over his whole face,
yeah,
which
genius.
is good because I don't
yeah,
have a buff handy, but you can still see out through them,
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
you know?
Yeah.
I think
Um,
if you can keep the mud off your face, do it. Like when
yeah.
we had our first immunity challenge, we are sliding down this A-frame, and I'm like, I'm keeping my face out, and we just had to crawl under something that was like
Mhm.
raised.
Mm-hmm.
But with these guys, like the rope's right on them, like that's pressing them in. The rope above you is muddy. Like, yeah,
Yeah.
you need that because if you can't see, like that's.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Do I have mud on my lip?
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Well, there were, of course, some other things going on, and I'll be putting some of it as clips in my YouTube shorts at David Bloomberg TV. But before we get to how Jon did, I want to mention that the rules we're about to discuss come in a colorful and shorter form as a poster. So go to robhasawebsite.com/yxlostfeed, scroll down to that poster and click on it, and then order it, and our crack shipping department will get one right out to you.
Crack?
Crack. Yes. Not on crack. You're the crack shipping department,
Okay. I'll send it to you.
Yes. Um, you're ruining the illusion of the shipping department. Um,
Yes, there are so many people
yeah, a
working to pack
big,
these for us. Yes.
big operation, these
Big
posters.
operation over here.
Um, You can keep scrolling down and find the poster on a T-shirt,
Mhm.
or you can find the shirt that Jessica is wearing, the
Yes. I have
checklist
to go
on a
this way so you can see
T-shirt.
everything. Yeah.
So again, go to robhaswebsite.com/yxlostfeed, and you can do all of those things.
You can wear us. You can hang us in your space. It'll be lovely.
Well, Jeff Probst said in his podcast that Jon was voted out because the others saw him as a threat to win, which sounds a bit premature for the first tribal council. Jon talked about the tribe not having many strategic discussions, and the TV episode made it look like an issue of Jon not fitting in with his younger tribe mates. Were any of these the actual explanation? How did the situation with Andy affect the outcome? At RHAP, we know Survivor, and we know why Jon lost.
Ooh.
Yes,
That
new
was sharp.
tagline.
That was sharp.
Um, it's part of the rebranding.
I love
Um,
this. It's so good.
um, the first and most important rule is to scheme and plot. Jon definitely understood this and made attempts to get himself out of his jam by doing so. The problem was, I don't think he started doing it early enough. In the show, we saw him getting paired up with Andy almost right away. And in his interviews, Jon talked about two other pairs forming, Sam and Sierra and Rachel and Annika. And he said he had a good relationship with Annika early, but didn't do a good job of maintaining it. So obviously, that's one thing he could have done. However, there are some hints, both within the show and his interviews, that all may not have been exactly as he thought. Now, we can't 100% confirm this until other members of his tribe who were in the know are voted out and do interviews. But we've seen situations like this before, many times. When the player on the outs says things like there was very little strategic conversation, or people were reluctant to break into groups to discuss strategy or the like, it almost always turns out that wasn't quite the case. And rather, other people were discussing strategy. They just weren't discussing it with you.
Who would say
that's,
that?
I know. I mean, that's my suspicion here. And I'm like, oh, I hope this doesn't hit too close to home, Jake.
No, you're good.
Jake, how do you feel about that?
Yeah, no, that's correct. That's correct. Like if people, I don't know, maybe back in like 2010, like 2011, maybe that was the case. But I mean, look, with the people they're casting on New Era Survival, like everyone's got a plan. Everyone's got a plan.
Yes.
Yeah.
Maybe like, I don't know, like a Roxroy has like two plans over you, but like that, or no plan at all. But that would be it. Like everyone's got a plan. And if people aren't if nobody's talking to you, you know, you should know where you're at.
Yes.
Yeah, we saw it especially last season, you know, in the early episodes with Venus, who kept saying, no one wants to talk strategy. And meanwhile, they've all made alliances and you're not in them, you know?
That's a tough, I mean, I felt Venus in that, you know what I mean? Like it's a tough spot. It puts you in a position where you're like, now I need it. How do I do it? And it's a state of panic when it's it's kind of like a Chinese finger trap. Like, you know, how do you pull?
Yeah.
Yeah. And I do think that there's something to be said where if you are not necessarily feeling like you are part of the group, and he thought that he had a relationship with Andy, I don't think he necessarily was trying to foster that beyond Andy, because if Andy was somehow integrating himself with the others, he could have utilized Andy as a bridge, but it didn't seem like that was necessarily what was happening. It was almost like I've got Andy over here, but I've got some maybe concerns about Andy. Instead of utilizing Andy, I think in the way that it would have been better for him to try to integrate with everyone.
Yeah. Now, some of what Jon said in interviews was also a little confusing to me, because he said people told him right after the challenge that Andy was going and he knew they were lying. But he also had said, as we mentioned, that nobody was strategizing beforehand. So how would they have gotten so locked in among the four of them between what happened with Andy in the challenge and right after, when players, of course, aren't allowed to talk to each other during transport to and from challenges? So it seems to me that it is quite possible they were already locked in against Jon. Otherwise, based on the timeline he gave, they simply didn't have the opportunity to get their stories and plans straight.
Mm,
So I know he put some of the blame on what happened with Andy. I don't think that was necessarily what caused it. To the contrary, I think what happened with Andy caused some of them to question the decision they had already made. And that may have been what led to discussions, that we saw on the show about like challenge strength and stability. I think the timeline, that Jon thinks happened may be a little off. I think they locked in against Jon.
Yeah.
Then they saw what happened. They started debating amongst themselves, the four,
Mm.
rather than kind of flipping it around like Jon was thinking.
Yeah, that's an interesting point because I do think, and Jake, you can probably speak to this as well, how quickly determinations are made as to who needs to go. It's one
yeah.
of those like you're like, okay, that person has to go. And then someone else will talk, okay, that person has to go. And so there's an agreement. And so if something happens to derail that initial plan, yes, there needs to be follow-up conversations like, oh God, should we still stick with the plan that we made before because this happened over here? So I think that's a very valid point that there was probably a a pretty certain determination that had been made. It's going to be Jon. And then all of these things were happening with Andy. So they have to convince themselves that what Andy can still bring to the table is better than what we've got going on with Jon. And so that I think that definitely makes sense as to why that determination was made. But for viewers looking at it, it likely seemed off because why would you not just choose this person? But you've already chosen a person or chosen a person, so you need to kind of revisit that decision.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think I think the interesting thing about the first vote too in New Era Survivor is that this is the longest cycle, right? Like in New Era, someone's getting voted out every 2 days or one day right after the next, right?
Mhm.
The first cycle is 3 days. Jon had 3 days out there. So by the time they get to the challenge on day three, I'd imagine this had already been talked, like you guys are saying, like I'd
Right.
imagine it had been already talked about at length. I wouldn't be shocked if what the idea was going in was Andy or Jon, maybe not necessarily locked in on Jon,
Mhm.
but Andy or Jon. Andy does what Andy does at the challenge, and it's like, I'm not afraid of Andy anymore. It's
Yeah.
Jon. It's like we don't have to like. It's kind of. I think Andy kind of. I think they could have shied away from voting out Andy after that event because kind of Andy showed all his cards. We're not scared of him. And if you look at the past couple seasons of Survivor, this kind of idea of a human smokescreen has been used
Mhm.
very commonly. I haven't heard it talked about too much, but with this season you may have Andy. Last season you had Venus and Q. The season before you had me. The season I don't know, but there's this development of a smokescreen person that we're not going to bring in that much, but oh, who are we voting out next? And it's going to be easy to take out those threats you
Right.
want to take because the vote is almost so obvious. And I think Andy kind of secured himself that for the next round or maybe
Yeah.
two.
Yeah.
Issue though that I feel for the tribe though, sorry, that I think in keeping Andy and the difference here with having that smoke screen person, which I appreciate and I think is exactly what's likely going to be happening here. Andy has revealed himself to the other tribes as well. And so that's where things can be a little bit more hinky in the new era Survivor when you do have these journeys and when you have these things that people are going to separate from their tribes and individual with
Yeah.
people from other tribes, that then you have to be concerned because Andy has made it very clear, I'm on the outs, they don't like me, I'm in trouble. So if Andy gets to go on a journey, whoever meets Andy is going to be just waiting and just and I can't wait to talk to this person and find out all of the information. And so there could be some concerns as to what he would share and whether or not he's going to flip if they make it to emerge. And so those are the things that I look at this decision and go, I don't know if necessarily as a group it's going to be safe because now he's kind of thrown everyone under the bus. It wasn't
Yeah.
just Jon, it was everyone. And in this type of gameplay, you are allowing him an opportunity to share with other tribes what's going on in your tribe before you even get there.
I'd agree with that. I will say the thing with the smoke screen person too is that it always screws over their original tribe.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
always screws over their original tribe. Like Venus is a smoke screen. Soda Tevin Hunter goes, I'm a smoke screen. Bruce Kelly Kendra goes. Like that's I
Mhm.
think that's the only thing that like you're saying that could become an issue for them down the line. But I think with if there is prior to a swap, this could help someone. Who do we think is? Can we talk about who we think is controlling those votes? I think who's ever in charge, like strategically, or who's ever the best positioned, will be
Mm.
able to use it
Yeah,
effectively.
we could definitely talk about that more probably in Appendix A, I think.
Okay, okay.
So, I did want to mention another piece of circumstantial evidence in favor of it having been locked in ahead of time was that Andy mentioned in his whole turmoil that he was going to throw Jon under the bus. I don't think that came out of nowhere. I think
Mm.
Yeah.
that was a slip of what he actually planned to do, because I think he found out that the others were targeting Jon, which, would have been obviously before the challenge.
Mhm.
I can't tell you how he would have found out. If I had to guess, maybe he heard it from Rachel before he had that bad night's sleep and wasn't on her good side anymore. I mean, quite honestly, that might have helped cause his bad night's sleep. Just thinking about, oh my gosh, I'm in with Jon, but now I've heard that Jon could be the target. What am I going to do? Um, I mean, now
Yeah.
I'm really diving deep into what might be, but
Well, that's what you have to do. You have to dive deep, right?
that's right. That's right. No,
Dive
dig
deep.
deep. On Survivor, you dig deep.
Okay,
On
you
here, you
dig deep.
dive deep.
I know you dive
Yeah.
deep, but
Yeah.
also when you're going into a well, you might be diving deep and not digging deep.
Oh,
You
You
see
dig
yes.
that?
well, and then you dive into it.
Yes.
Is order of operations.
Yes. All right. Well, this would, of course, lead us to wonder why they would have locked in against Jon rather than Andy at that point. Let's wait for that, because it comes back to some actions we'll discuss in later rules. For now, within this rule, what I think we could say is Jon took a swing to change things up by trying to get Sam to join himself and Andy to vote out Annika.
Mm.
But we also saw Sam quickly reject the idea, which further tells me that things were already set by that point. And indeed, Jon told Rob he's very confident that it was already him as the target before he put Annika's name out there. But he tried.
Yeah. And Sam was great in that scene too. I've got to give
Mhm.
him credit for really seeming to acknowledge that idea and acting like, "Oh yeah, no, this sounds like that would be a good plan." And then immediately it was like, "No."
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
but he did so good in that moment. It was great.
I like Sam a lot. I
Yeah.
think he's going deep, right? Like that would be a huge blindside if he got
Yeah.
blindsided. Like he's just the kind of guy. He gives me and I said this about Hunter last season, and like my person who I compare it to, I compare him to like Austin. You know what I mean? Like it's
Mm.
a guy, he gets along with everyone. Like he's clearly a smart dude, but you're not worried about getting stabbed in the back by him.
Mhm.
Yeah.
At
Yeah.
least early on.
Yeah.
You know.
And he's a Bears fan. So, obviously he's, going to do well. Now, before he may have to keep that whole Bears fan thing under wraps since he works for the Titans now. So sorry, but he grew up near me. So, before Jon's interviews, I was thinking Jon should have turned on Andy and done everything he could to get people to go with what seemed to be the easy vote. After hearing the situation in terms of conversations he had and how people were insisting that they were voting Andy,
Mm-hmm.
I understand why he couldn't really do more in that department. And he said in another interview that he believes he had a conversation with Annika to try to throw the vote on Andy. But again, the problem was she said she was already doing that. So how do you
Right.
change a vote against you when everyone is insisting that they're already voting the way you want?
No.
Right. Yeah. Tough spot.
I do think the first vote can be a runaway.
Mm-hmm.
I think the first vote, and we've seen in a lot of seasons, can just be like I don't want to say there's nothing anyone can do. I think it's like early on, like literally those first couple minutes, you have to integrate yourself. But I think like if we're talking about day 3, what could have Jon have done the morning of day 3? Probably not a lot.
Yeah, that
If we're taking this.
exactly. That ball was all, that snowball was already
Yeah.
darn near the bottom of the hill at that
Yeah.
point, you know.
It's almost by the time you realize it, sometimes it's
Yeah.
too late.
Yeah.
Unfortunately for Jon.
Yeah. All right. Well, we can go to the second rule, which says not to scheme and plot too much and to keep your scheming secret. Now, right off the bat, I think we have part of the answer to how the vote got locked in against him early. He and Andy went off to get logs, and we saw on the show that Andy said he was the one who pulled Jon aside. And then Jon said the same thing in his interviews, noting, Andy pulled me for 1 second on day one. All of a sudden, I'm tied to Andy. Personally, by the way, I don't necessarily think that was all that tied him to Andy. I think it was his own joking at the mat when Andy's like, I had 4 friends in high school, and Jon's like, 4 friends, you're lucky. You know, they were kind of trying to out nerd each other at that point. So, but anyway, what we also saw was Jon immediately got the blame. So Andy pulls him aside, and Sierra tells the other 3, Jon grabbed Andy and took him away.
Yeah.
So that showed who the other 4 thought was the one who was being schemy. The facts didn't matter. Only the perception did.
Yes, which is something we have talked about ad nauseum. Perception becomes reality. So if you don't want to be locked in with someone, don't disappear with that person within the first 5 minutes of being on the island, period.
Yeah, I mean, they were scheming and plotting too much. Perception based, not actually. So they're getting tied to that anchor.
Yeah.
But that's what happens. I mean, it's you could have been like, oh, and I can use an example from my season where we happen to be like first day, we're setting everything up, trying to get the camp life structured in a fashion that would make everyone happy. And I happen to look over and I see that Sunday is digging a hole, and she's digging a hole with with Cece, and they're like over off in the woods. And I was like, why are they digging? And it was this whole like thing. And then we were all like, oh my God, they're digging. Do you know what they were doing? They were digging a poop spot. but everyone, but we saw it, and production actually went over and told them that's not a good poop spot because it was too close to the camp. But that's what they had decided. They're like, we're gonna this is gonna be our poop spot, and that was all they were doing. But from anyone outside looking in, you're like, oh my God, they're digging, they're looking for something, they're in cahoots, they're working together. No, it was a poop spot. So this is what I'm saying. Like immediately, whatever you do, people are going to respond in a particular way. They're going to assume certain things that they just don't know because they're playing Survivor.
Yeah.
So yes, something as simple as pulling someone aside to go look for wood or what, and then now you're locked in and now you're together.
Yeah, and also, you know, Jon told Mike Bloom, I don't know that there's a way for me to play the game without coming across as strategic and smart, to be honest. Now, I would say there was a way, but it would have meant hiding who he was. And he also told Mike, I wasn't going to not be myself because I'd rather go home as myself than try to hide and kind of soften the edges and never have been on the show at all. So could I have done something different? Yes. I think there are ways I could have been a little less brazen in terms of being strategic, maybe. And that part, I agree with him. He could have done something different. He chose not to. That's up to him. You know, Andy, on the other hand, was hiding that side of himself. And one of his tribe mates even commented that he wasn't very strategic. I think it was Rachel, but I'm not 100% sure. You know, everybody comes into Survivor a little bit differently. Some admit to being to lawyers. Some pretend to have different jobs. Some admit to being...
I feel a little called out, Jake. What do you think?
Quickly defending that. Right before we went to go film Survivor 45, Josh was just voted out and outed for being a doctor. I'm like, and my whole thinking behind it is like my demeanor, I think, is going to counteract that. I think there was other reasons why I was put on the bottom. I don't think it was because I was an attorney. I think it was unfortunate that I started on a tribe with another person who also was an attorney, and that didn't work out well. But sorry,
listen, I was a photographer. I never admitted I was a lawyer. So listen, I understand entirely needing to perhaps hide some components of yourself. So yeah, but lawyers seem to be taking over Survivor as of late. So this is a good time for us.
Yeah,
it's a great time for us. I mean, I wish we had more $1 million, but
that is a very fair point for sure. Yes.
Yul and Nick, right? That's it.
Yul wasn't at the time.
Yeah.
Though.
He wasn't at the time. Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
I didn't think because I could be incorrect, and someone correct me if I am wrong, but I thought I thought that Nick was the first attorney that actually won,
Okay.
but I don't know.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, so basically, what it comes down to is, some people admit different things. Some admit to being smart and strategic. Some do their best to hide it.
Mm.
The problem is, like you just said, Jake, sometimes one of those things can be held against you, but it could also be held against you if you hide it, like you said with Dr. Josh, and you're found out.
Yes.
Can I say that, like, I do think that, like, Jon being viewed as a smart guy, like viewed as being more intelligent or more of a threat than Andy, I I don't think that matters if he's just in early, right? Like in the
Right.
determination, like after the four solidified themselves, like Sam and the women on the tribe solidified themselves. Okay, Andy and Jon are the two people
Yes.
on the outs. Between the two of them, Jon is smarter. But if you don't even have to go into that logic of between the two, you're in the original four. Like I think Jon might be right. He might not be able to play it down so much, especially where even if he talks about his job, he does a political podcast, and he's clearly
Yeah.
you could tell he's a well-read guy, and you can
Mhm.
only hide that for so long, even if he's gonna attempt to do
Mm-hmm.
that just based on his occupation. Like I think if it comes down to that, he's always going to be viewed as the smarter person. Maybe not as big a threat as the other person,
Mhm.
but he's always going to be viewed as that kind of way. I think his way was to get into the four if he could. Unfortunately, the train kind of leaves the station quicker than you'd expect.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I agree. A lot of this, I think the theme that we're seeing is going to be comparatively,
Yes.
that and in this case, when you see two people go off, you believe one of them is strategic and the other one isn't. Well, who are you going to blame?
Right.
Yeah.
So even though
Right.
Andy was the one who pulled him aside, Jon got the blame.
Oh, that's a very, very valid point. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, the third rule tells players to be flexible. And I know we've already discussed a lot about Jon's attempts or lack of attempts to strategize. But, Jake, what did you think of Jon's flexibility in the few days that we saw him?
I mean, I didn't think it was bad, right? Like, I mean, he was clearly ready to shake things up. He wasn't. I think we saw that as soon as he's like, "Oh, you're the backup vote." Jon's like, mm, "Maybe we do Annika. Maybe we switch it up." It's especially for the first. I understand sometimes the situations in the game where you just have to bite the bullet and accept that you're going to be the backup person. I do believe that, but I don't think you should really be asking anyone to be that for the first vote. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? Like and I wouldn't expect any player going out there. Don't bite the bullet. I would recommend not biting the bullet on that one. Do not bite the bullet on the first vote of being the backup target. And clearly Jon didn't do that and attempted to do something about it. Wasn't successful. But yeah, I don't think Jon's problem was flexibility at all.
Yeah. No, I'd agree.
Yeah, I agree with you. It's a little hard for me to say. In his interviews, he repeatedly talked about the situation he was in and the way it kind of narrowed down the possible options to just him.
Hmm.
Mm.
I do think we have to go back to what he said about a missed opportunity to connect more with Annika as key because, once he got tagged as Andy's partner, like we've been discussing, he was kind of stuck.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think there's a difference between flexibility of being able to do anything
Right.
versus
Right.
being willing to
Mm-hmm.
do
Right.
anything.
Yes.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Like in terms
Very
of
fair.
willing to do anything, I think that Jon was that. I think in ability to, obviously not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we can go to the fourth rule, which tells players not to let their emotions control them. And while we certainly saw one member of this tribe get emotional, that's a different story for another day. Jessica, how do you think Jon did here?
I feel like he actually did a really nice job at controlling himself, considering what Jake was just talking about, being told, "Hey, you're going to be the backup vote, FYI."
Yeah.
And he didn't want to be that, but he didn't respond in a way that was like, oh my gosh, no. He just kind of accepted it. He probably should have said something more at that point in time because, as Jake was just saying, that you don't want to be the backup vote because that means you
Mhm.
might be the vote. So I do think that he did manage to keep things in check. Also, when you're getting called out in front of every other
Yeah.
member of every tribe, that I was going to throw Jon under the bus. Like, whoa, what did I do? I
Yeah.
didn't do anything. And he just stood there and just took it. And so
Yeah.
that had to have been a very uncomfortable moment. And I feel like I would want to say something like, listen, I'm not sure what he's even talking about, why I'm being thrown under the bus, because you have to be mindful of who your audience is. It's not just your own tribe. It's the people over on the other mats that know nothing of what's going on. And they're just going to read into that. So if there's a chance that Jon saves himself and then they come back to the mat and they see Jon, the other people might be a little suspicious of Jon. And if there's a swap or if there's a journey, so there's all of these other permutations that he needed to be thinking about. And the fact that he didn't respond, I was quite surprised. I was quite surprised at his ability to keep that in check.
Yeah. That was really impressive. Like, two very difficult situations. I don't know if I would have reacted the same way. And I don't know if a lot of, like, if this show's casting, I don't want to say, like, Jon's obviously good at casting. If this show's casting correctly, 50% of the people cast should not be able to handle that. And luckily for Jon,
Yeah.
Jon was able to handle both of those
Right.
effectively.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
he responded in a, fairly logical way, kind of
Yeah.
explaining what Andy had said in a more neutral manner. But remember what Jon does for a living. I think it's safe
Mhm.
to say he's used to being on the receiving end of a wide variety of very emotional insults and attacks. Much
Hmm.
worse, much, much worse than anything Andy,
Mm.
indicated here. So, maybe that experience has made him better able to handle something that was much tamer in comparison.
Do we
Mhm.
I want to run through this real quick. Do we think if Jon in the moment on the mat is like, honestly, Andy, F you. What's going on? And he like got mad and maybe seemed a little unhinged back towards Andy. Is there the possibility that helps?
Well, at that point,
Right?
why not try it? Right?
Like,
Yeah.
so they're
Like,
trying to,
like you can go back to camp and we're all like, honestly, fuck this guy. Like, you're like, yeah, this is ridiculous. Oh my god. Like, blah 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 blah. Blah. Is there the,
Why
like, I was
not?
thinking
Right?
about this. I'm like, because the whole conversation was, wow, Jon handled that greatly, and he did, but he still went home. Maybe he
Right.
shouldn't. Is there the
Just
potential
lost it. Right.
if he's just like, honestly, Jeff, this is ridiculous. This guy says he's seen every season, blah 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 blah. You know what I mean? Just go in.
Yeah. I
Like,
think I love this. I love this approach. Go all in and just leave it all on the mat right there. Just be like, listen, like, look at the other tribes. Like, are you all hearing this? Did you see what just happened? Like, are we kidding? Something that would have been, I think that would have been great. A great moment. That would have been a great moment.
I'm like, kind of like, how could Jon have stayed after like day 2 of things being decided? I don't know, because like people do get along. Like, if people don't like somebody, and if the tribe doesn't like Andy right now, and Jon can kind of come in and it's like, honestly, yeah, guys, like, this is ridiculous. Like, what are we doing here? You know,
Mm-hmm.
maybe, I don't
I
know
think
if
so.
like maybe like a 15% chance it might have worked,
yeah,
but I can't think it's zero.
Out-
I can't
kind
think
of-
it's 0% chance
Yes.
of working.
out smoke screen the smoke screen,
Yes.
out
Yes.
QQ, out Venus, out.
Yes.
I like this. I like this approach a lot. That
Well,
would have
he's
been
gonna get saved for
entertaining.
being the smoke screen. I gotta start,
Yeah.
building a fire, puffing more smoke. You know what I mean? I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't think it's a 0% chance. I don't think it's a 0% chance.
So he should have completely violated this rule and just gone
Yeah.
totally emotional on this.
Yes.
And then
he
that's what
should've-
we would have been talking about.
Yeah.
Or
Yes.
talking about Andy. I mean,
Yeah.
who knows? There's so many
Yes.
possibilities.
All
Not
right,
to
well,
win. Not to win.
Not
Not
to
the
win.
rules of Survivor to win,
Yeah.
but to survive the vote.
Yes.
Yes. That is a very good point to make. Like, this is, you always need to make it to the next day, right?
Yeah,
And things can
that's right.
shift and change. So
Yep.
it's not a bad plan.
I
Not a
like to
bad
think
one.
there's a 15% chance that would have worked and saved him.
I like it. I support
I
this.
do. I like that. God, that would have been hysterical. All right. Well, we can move to the 5th rule, which reminds players they need to pretend to be nice unless they're going off on someone in response.
Yes.
And play the social game. I don't think there's any doubt that Jon was nice.
Yeah.
Maybe
Mm.
maybe Jake a little too nice, according to your possible plan there. But the real question here is how he did in the social game aspect. It was portrayed somewhat as if he didn't really fit in. So, Jake, what do you think?
For in terms of him fitting in, yeah, I think he was. I mean, he said in exit interviews he may have been too. What do you say? Brazen with people? Was that what he was saying?
He said
Mm.
that going in that he could do
Oh,
that.
going in.
I couldn't
Yeah, I
remember him.
mean,
Yeah.
yeah, he came across as nice. I think it was just getting in with the people right away.
Mhm.
That didn't happen. I mean, his confessionals were fun. His confessionals weren't that biting, even like, I know when we think of this, we think of like Boston Rob and talking crap in confessionals,
Yeah.
but his confessionals weren't, they were fun. They were funny. He's a funny guy, but they weren't, screw these people. These people are crazy. I mean, he had some comments about
Right.
Andy's losing it a little bit,
Yeah.
but nothing really super biting. I don't have any reason to believe when they didn't know his podcast, like, he might have been more ticked up, but yeah, he seemed like a really nice guy out there,
Yeah.
He was a little insulted. It'd be like Bloomberg going out there and they'd be like, "Wait, you don't know who I am? Wait
Yeah.
a second."
I'm wearing a podcaster shirt. What the hell? Yeah, I mean, Jon did tell Mike Bloom he thought it through afterwards and wondered, did he have trouble fitting in or was he building good connections? Was it a social problem? And his answer to himself was maybe a little bit of the latter. But he goes back in his mind to it being what he described as, quote, an outcome of the strategic dynamics, not social ones. Because much like Andy showed us, it was a math problem with a group of 6.
Mm,
He added to Dalton Ross. Sam and Sierra seemed to pair right away. Annika and Rachel were in the middle, and it was me and Andy. And I think what you saw in the episode was real, which is that Rachel really discounted Andy. So then there was just a natural flow towards Sam and Sierra, and that
Mm.
really had nothing to do with me. I really do think it was less of a social thing and more of just a strategic challenge in a group of 6 people where there's nowhere to hide. So again, that was him telling Dalton that.
Yeah, but I also feel like in his press that he provided, pregame press, I was really hopeful that he was going to kind of be that, I almost want to say like a David Wright kind of personality where he's able to connect in a way that's almost self-deprecating, but then also doesn't seem to be any type of a concern.
Mhm.
But I don't know if he's necessarily able to connect that way with people because I think Jake, you've already said he's clearly very well read. He's a smart individual. And if you are not able to connect in a way that also minimizes that part of you,
yep,
then that can be the focal point, right? That like, oh, he
yep,
seems nice, but he also seems there's something else there. Like he's very smart. He's well read. There's something going on which then can elevate you to a different level in the minds of people you're playing Survivor with. Whereas if you have Andy, who's like an open book, Andy's just like
yep,
putting it all out there, like this is exactly what's going on, and I'm not a strategic person, and they're not going to think you're a strategic person because of the way that you're
Mhm.
behaving. And so, I think when you start to like kind of weigh that out with each other, he becomes more of a concern, even if
yep,
he's getting along with everyone. There's something a little more questionable about what's going on under the surface with Jon, and I just think that's the way Jon is. So he's a fine, lovely person and he's sociable, but there's something else there that just leads them to question, is he being a little more underhanded and sneaky?
right.
Yeah. Now, even with all of this, Jon also told Mike Bloom, I had some really good moments with Annika, with Rachel, and with Andy. They were really funny, good conversations with everyone. But that to me was where I felt the most comfortable. And what I had hoped would happen, what I expected would happen is Rachel, Annika, and I had a natural affinity with Annika and with Rachel. I just feel like we're the kind of people that would get along. I continue to believe that's true. And so I felt like what would ultimately happen if we had to go to vote is it would be basically persuading Annika and Rachel to come along with me and with Andy.
Mm.
But of course, that didn't happen. So, were his connections not as tight as he thought? Or does it go back to what I quoted a moment ago about it not being social but strategic? I suspect it was the latter. I think it's easier for the TV show to make it look like he wasn't fitting in because of his age or personality or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
It's easier for them to do that than to explain the strategic dynamic of what was happening.
Yeah, and if you're that
Yeah.
other group and you're trying to decide who you want to lock in with, are you
Mhm.
going to lock in with the person who is not is kind of almost having a meltdown, and then you've also got the person that is you're like questioning, well, he's nice, but we think that he's a little more
Right.
strategic, like, or do you go with the two people who are like, there's no issues over here? It's like it kind
Yeah.
of seems to be like an easy choice when you're weighing those two
Mhm.
options.
Yeah, I think that in this case, in the first 3 days, it's often said you can't. It's said about Survivor. It's said about poker. It's said about lots of things.
Yeah.
You can't win in the first 3 days, but you can lose in the first 3 days, and that's where this
Mhm.
rule kind of comes in. Your social game is not going to be so amazing, probably, that people are going to say, "Oh my God, look at this person. We must keep them around," even though the
Yeah.
strategy says not to. But you can have a social game that's so bad that people are like, we have to get rid of this person. John didn't have that. That's not what I'm
Right.
saying at all. What
Yeah.
I'm saying is,
Right.
even as he was saying he had good social relationships with people, it just wasn't enough to save him from the strategy that was going on.
Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah.
All right. Well, the sixth rule warns against being too much of a threat. And Jeff Probst said in the On Fire podcast, I referenced this earlier, that he thinks people saw John as this incredible storyteller who could win the game, making him a threat. Jeff is overthinking it, and the other players didn't go that deep. I'm sorry. Pretty
Yeah.
much none of them even knew who he was. So the only thing they could judge was their own interaction with him and what he told them. And just as confirmation of this, Mike Bloom tweeted out an image uh, that showed someone saying, "What the blank is that?" And the caption was the Gata tribe when John describes his podcast. Sierra quote tweeted it and said, "Facts." So if John was a threat, it wasn't for that reason. Confirmation. They didn't know who he was.
Right, right. And he did have some great commentary on the mat right off the rip.
Right.
It's always good when you can like get that sound bite back right at Jeff and you're like, yeah, look at
Yep.
what I just did. So I'm sure that made a few people pause and realize, he's quick on his feet. But who knows if it went any
Right.
further than that.
Yeah. I wouldn't have known John going out there. The
I
first
wouldn't
time I
either.
learned about John and him being the whole thing, like the whole what he did, was I got a text from someone being like, "Why did you tell me Jon Lovett was on Survivor?" It's like, I number one didn't know, number two, who the fuck is that?
I have to admit, as much as as involved as I am in politics, I didn't. When someone said the name,
Yeah.
after I realized it wasn't Jon Lovett's,
Yeah.
it was like, okay, that name sounds familiar. Yeah, I've heard the
Right.
name of the podcast, but as many podcasts as I listen to, I don't listen to.
Yeah.
I listen to maybe one or two podcasts that deal with political topics. I
Yeah.
frequently guest on one that deals with sometimes with political
Yeah.
topics, but I don't listen to that podcast. It's
Yeah.
so I certainly wouldn't have known him by sight either.
Right.
Yeah. I consider myself like I pay attention to politics a lot.
Yeah.
No clue. My bad.
Yeah.
Sorry, John. You're great though. The stuff that I hear
Yeah.
now,
Agreed.
why wasn't
Agreed.
I listening?
Yeah.
But
See, it's
you know,
great
that's
advertising
on
for
me,
his
not you.
podcast.
Oh yeah. I feel like now that John's been on it, like the stuff that I do listen to politically, like I do hear, oh, the pod saved bros, and I'm like, oh, okay,
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there was plenty going on with Pod Save America while he was out on the island. There was lots of big discussions and arguments going on with them. He was probably better off on the island during that time, honestly.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, getting away from that, it's since we're still in the sixth rule talking about threats, I'm not saying that John wasn't a threat. Jessica, like you said, he showed he was smart on his feet.
Yeah.
And we discussed in the second rule that he was seen as perhaps being too strategic. And we saw that on TV as well after he tried to get Sam to turn on Annika. Sam said in confessional that John was very smart and a strategist. I mean, yeah, that happened after I believe the vote was locked in. But I don't think Sam just suddenly kind of light bulb moment came to that idea. I think it was something he'd already been thinking. Because
Mm.
again, remember what I mentioned earlier about the tribe blaming Jon for pulling Andy away. But I think more importantly than Jon being specifically a big threat, this gets back, Jake, to what you were saying earlier. He was seen as more of a threat specifically than Andy.
hmm
Mm.
If the other four already considered themselves an alliance, which I think it's clear they did, then the choice came down to Jon or Andy, like we were saying. And remember that Rachel said she didn't see Andy as a strategist, so that reduced his threat level. And of course, after what happened with Andy at the challenge, as Jon told Dalton Ross, Andy is now weakened in front of the whole tribe. At that moment, everybody is recognizing that Andy is basically someone you're either going to carry along or get rid of, but isn't
Mm.
really a threat anymore. So, in
Mhm.
comparison, even not knowing much about Jon outside the game, he was still seen as more of a threat than
Yeah.
Andy.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we can move to the seventh rule, which covers idols and advantages in game mechanics. And, Jon didn't find any clues or keys or boxes within boxes within boxes.
So
But
many
so
boxes.
many
Oh my God.
boxes. I said at the time, when one of them, I think it was Gabe, was pulling the box out of the ground. Um, I if this had been Australian Survivor, he had just ripped the lid off. In Australian Survivor, they did that. They couldn't get the key, so they just ripped the lid off the box, and they were like,
There you
production
go.
was like, okay. Um, so, but Jon didn't have that opportunity. He did have a decision to make about the shot in the dark. And he explained in his interviews that he figured his plan to get Sam and Sierra on his and Andy's side to vote out Annika had about a 20% chance of working, which is a little higher than using the shot. It's not clear to me how he came up with that number out of like
Mm.
pulling it out of thin air. Um,
Mhm.
Considering that he said in interviews that the women were seeming to get pretty tight in addition to having the three groups of two, which
Mhm.
we talked about earlier. Uh, and he also told Rob he knows he was the target before he put Annika's name out there. It just seems to me that the odds were slimmer than the 1 in 6 chance he'd have with a
Mhm.
shot in the dark. And,
Agreed.
Jake, you put him at a 15% chance of being successful if he went uh bat guano crazy on Andy in response. So that's also pretty close to shot in the dark, the level there.
Yeah, I mean, looking at the numbers, I did hear those comments about the considerations of Annika versus playing shot in the dark. Yeah, just play it. I
Yeah,
think just
right?
do it. And honestly, I think there's also a strategic benefit to no longer having shot in the dark moving down the line in the game. I think
Mhm.
having the option makes you more unreliable to your alliance because you do have the opportunity to not vote. If
Mhm.
you don't
Right.
have the shot in the dark, you're voting, barring some other
Right.
production
Right.
thing. But I like because after I played mine, it was kind of like a weight off my shoulders. It's like, oh yeah, I don't have it, but there's not much sense of security in having it anyway. So
Right. Right.
I think if especially in this circumstance, I think play it, but then even the benefit down the line, I think is worthwhile playing it
Mhm.
regardless of the outcome of shot in the dark.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Obviously, he
I
needed the
agree.
certain outcome here,
Yeah.
but
Yeah. All right. Well, we can move to Appendix A, which is about the players keeping their end goals in mind when voting. And we talk about voting out the weak, then the strong, then the weak, then the strong. We saw a lot of debate involving whether the tribe should keep Andy for his physical strength and challenges compared to
mm,
Jon. And Andy did show strength in the challenge with the chests and helping to pull up the boat. And others, talked to him about, now, admittedly, they were trying to make him feel better, but, said he provided bamboo and shelter, etc. And right there is a perfect example of the strong versus weak situation. But
Mhm.
mm,
of course, we here on this podcast know it goes deeper than that because it's not just about challenge strength,
Mhm.
which is one reason there was a debate within the four. In addition to being physically stronger, Andy was seen as being a potential stronger ally because he'd be theoretically easier to control. Now,
Yes.
earlier, we talked a little bit about him being possibly a weaker ally, but from Jon's standpoint, at least, like he said to Mike Bloom, that Andy blew up in front of the whole cast, so he's going to have to be loyal to his tribe mates. Quote, everybody else has already seen he's unreliable. He'll be in your debt. And then on the flip side, Jon noted that Jon himself was more strategic and others tribes could work with him. So from a unity or alliance standpoint, Jon was also weaker in terms of what the other players on his tribe thought.
Yes, but it does come with that risk, because if you believe that Andy is going to now owe you his loyalty, you better hope that that loyalty sticks around, and you better make him feel like he's really part of the group moving forward
Yeah.
when there's those journeys and when there's the merge. Because otherwise, if he's still feeling like he's on the outs, he is not going to be so strong in that group and that alliance as you hope he's going to be.
Yeah.
He might just end up flipping.
And I also disagree with Jon where he's kind of exposed himself to the other tribes. Like, obviously, they all saw the blow up. There's no mistaking that. But seeing something on a mat and then spending a couple hours with the person having conversations, if you hit a merge or a swap, are two wildly different things. Like, I remember in my season, like, people that I didn't see prior to the merge, like, I had certain perceptions of them. And then you get to the merge and you're like, I know I had this conversation, like, early on in Bella, we would say, oh, Drew, da 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 da, you know, because he's acting a certain way on the mat. But then I got to the merch and I'm like, oh, I really like Drew. Like, Drew's
Except for
someone
one
I would hang
moment
out
where
with. You
maybe
know what I
you
mean?
didn't so much, you know.
Well, later strategic things, but in terms of like, yeah.
Right.
But in terms of Jon saying, oh, he's exposed himself to everyone else, no one else is going to want to work with him down the line. I don't think that's necessarily true.
Right. Yeah.
Again, what matters is what the tribe thought was true,
Right.
you know.
And
Yeah.
yeah, I don't know if it was the best strategic move for them. I'm happy we get to see more of Andy, obviously, but
Right.
it'll be right for someone, wrong for someone else
Oh, yes.
on that tribe.
Yes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
All right. With that, it is about time to wrap things up. So, Jake, what are your final thoughts on Jon?
You know what, Jon, he didn't do a lot wrong. I think the train left the station without him, and I don't think there's much he could have done at that point. I mean, I think that's my final analysis. I thought Jon was obviously very funny. Effing podcast host was my favorite line. No offense to anyone on this one currently, but I thought that was funny. We're missing out, but we got a taste, and I'm excited to see more of the people who we maybe didn't get to see too much in this episode.
All right, Jessica, what are your thoughts?
Well, Jon, Pod Save America, but Jon couldn't save himself on Survivor. So that's unfortunate for
Ooh.
Jon. I know, and I feel bad, but I do think that Jon had what it takes to really do well in this game. But it's just a matter of, and I think, Jake, you said it so poignantly. You've got 3 days. And 3 days to either make or break your connections with these individuals that you're playing the game with, and the ability to connect with them in a way that's going to make them want to keep you, as opposed to looking at you and questioning whether or not they can. And I do think that we're looking at a group of 6 people, and they have to weigh what each person brings to the table. And right now, do I think that this group made the best decision by taking Andy over Jon? I'm with you, Jake. I'm questioning that decision, because I do feel like there's something to be said about whether or not Andy will maintain loyalty to them down the road if he's already feeling like he's on the outs. Whereas someone like Jon, he's might be an unknown, but I don't think you necessarily have to worry about his loyalty. You might have to worry about his strategic ability, but not necessarily his loyalty moving
Yeah.
forward. And so I do think that there is some issue with the choice that was made by the group. But Jon was in a situation where he had to work with that group. And unfortunately, he found himself in a spot where he was immediately tied to Andy and not really necessarily connecting on the same level as the other 4 people were connecting with each other. And it put him in a really bad spot. I do think that there's something to be said about the numbers that he went through and who is connecting with who. But when you come to that point where you realize it's 6 people only, you got to get in right away. And those are the moments that matter. And if you don't get in right away, you're going to be on the outs right away. And unfortunately for Jon, this is where we found him.
Before I get to my conclusion, Jessica, you just said something, and Jake, that it occurred to me, and I didn't think of it earlier. these players saw what happened last season in at least the first half of the season. There was a lot of discussion after the first episode when they voted out Jelinski. And then the very next challenge, they were like, oh, we could have really used a tall guy who had these physical characteristics and da-da-da. I do wonder how much that played into it, because there was a lot of discussion about that at the time when people were like, no, you should have gotten rid of Banu. And so now I'm not equating Jon with Banu in any way. I'm just saying, when it comes to some of the physical, I do wonder if that played in their thoughts.
Yes.
But anyway, Jon found himself on a tribe where being 41 made him the oldest person there. While that didn't help him integrate, it also wasn't a key factor. Just look at Sue on the other tribe. Andy and Jon both introduced themselves as kind of introverted nerds of the tribe and more or less naturally came together, further sparked by Andy pulling Jon aside. Meanwhile, the other four gravitated to each other in two duos, and each seemed to have their concerns about Jon and Andy. While the other players didn't really know who Jon was in terms of his full history, he did introduce himself as a podcaster. And right there, that told him he was obviously incredibly smart. I mean, that's clear. There's no other, way that could go.
I mean, of course.
Yeah. But more seriously, I do think for the other players, just talking to Jon, as he said to himself, or as he said himself, I don't know that there's a way for me to play the game without coming across as strategic and smart. They saw that. While what they saw of Andy, even before the challenge, did not make him seem like a strategist. It did, however, seem like he could help them in physical challenges, and they might be better able to control him. I do think there were opportunities for Jon to break through. He acknowledged as much when it came to Annika earlier. Even more than that, players can't assume that just because people aren't strategizing with you, that means they aren't strategizing at all. Something was clearly going on with the other four. And based even on what Jon said, they either had a plan to target him before the challenge or were so closely aligned in thought that they could put such a plan into effect mere moments afterwards. Through the strategic and social dynamics of the first few days, it came down to either Andy or Jon. Andy had more physical strength. Andy seemed less strategic. Andy would theoretically be in their debt and wouldn't have anywhere else to go. Jon's tribe had the choice of love it or leave it, and they chose leave it. And that is why Jon lost.
Wow. That was pro. That was some pro. That was some pro stuff right there.
I'm an effing podcaster.
Hey, there you go. That was good.
It's great. Oh, I do love that.
All right. Well, before we get to our predictions for next episode, I want to remind everyone that the rules we just discussed are available in poster and t-shirt, or poster on a t-shirt and checklist on a t-shirt form. Again, go to robhaswebsite.com/yxlostfeed and you can get all of those.
You should buy them.
Yes. So Jessica, in the meantime, again, before we get to predictions, where can people find all of us?
Oh, I always forget the order of things around here. So yes, you can certainly find me. I'm at Jessica Lewis 89. I'm also, and that's on Twitter, Instagram. I'm at Jessica Lewis 6789. I spend less time on Instagram. I just basically steal all of the content that David Bloomberg puts out. So thank you for that, David Bloomberg, because David Bloomberg, as many of you likely know, is all over social media, so much so that he has his very own linked tree that lists out everything that he does, so you can find all of the incredible content that he does create on so many platforms. So David, tell them where they can find you.
Yes, I have the link tree at linktree/David Bloomberg with a dot before the EE in the URL. You can find me more directly on Twitter and Blue Sky as at David Bloomberg, on Threads as at David Bloomberg TV. And I'm on the video platforms YouTube, TikTok, and Instagram as at David Bloomberg TV. I've been posting 3 or more videos per day all summer long. Right now, I'm, of course, posting clips from Survivor and Big Brother, plus a few from other shows like The Anonymous and The Circle. In addition, be sure that you're watching or listening to the Big Brother version of Why Blank Lost, where we have I have Big Brother 21's Ovi Kabir as my co-host. We still have a few weeks of double duty for me in that regard there. Jake, where can people find you?
On Instagram, I'm Jake O period Kane, and on Twitter, I'm like Jake O underscore Kane. I think. Yeah, just switch it up.
That's right. That's right.
And David, I got to appreciate your social media that I am still tagged when I broke Jeff's toys. I like that I'm still pinned up there. So thank you for that.
You are. That was one of the the most viewed that I have. At least I think it's on is it on Instagram where
I think it might be Instagram or TikTok.
Yeah,
I think
Instagram. Yeah, there's Instagram. There are 2.2 million views of you breaking the challenge.
Yeah,
and
that's amazing. Look at you, Jake.
So, and then there's probably a lot on YouTube and TikTok as well. That's not as easy to see, but yeah, you're still pinned up there.
Good stuff.
I didn't break anything today, so I consider this an accomplishment, getting through a Survivor-related thing and not breaking anything.
Hey, we're not done yet because we still have predictions.
Oh gosh.
So hopefully you don't break anything in predictions.
I don't like predictions.
I know. I'll go first.
Okay.
And I so the previews didn't give us much. There is, of course, more focus on Andy, and on the other tribe, Rome is a lot. I'm
Rome
really
is
not.
fine.
Yeah, I'm really not sure what's going on in the third tribe. I'm going to guess they're safe. I think Lavo, so that's the red tribe, will lose the immunity challenge. And, everybody in RHAP is going to be like, no. It seems, though, like Asia, Teeny, Keyshawn, and Saul are all on the same page. There was a secret scene in which Saul tried to tell Rome that he was drawing attention by leaving camp, but Rome totally misinterpreted the gesture.
Yeah.
Like Saul's trying to be nice to him, and then Rome is like, "Oh, why are you telling me this? You must be after me." And then went to talk to Genevieve about it. That plus what we saw in the first episode tells me Rome and Genevieve are tight. Now, Jessica, I told you I would not predict that Rome is going. And that's because we already saw Asia is worried he might have the immunity idol. Asia's very smart. And yeah, they're there's a lot of very smart people on that tribe. So I think what they're going to do is flush the idol and vote out Genevieve.
Well,
I really liked her in that secret scene. I liked her in that secret scene. I thought she was funny. Sorry, Jess, I cut you off, but I liked Genevieve in that secret scene. I don't want to see her go, but
I had when we did our initial podcast, there was this whole thing about Genevieve because she decided that rather than continue to practice making fire, she was going to play some video game for 40 hours or something. So I was like, Genevieve, like, what are you doing, Genevieve? Like, why would you do that?
To be fair, it's a very fun video game.
Oh, okay.
And I have dumped at least 40 hours into it. Baldur's Gate.
To the detriment of learning to make fire?
Well, it wasn't out when I was going out to play Survivor. So I don't know. I might have done the same thing as Genevieve had it been out at the time.
Well, I think differently. I think I'm going to go back to, I feel like we're going to have a repeat Yellow Tribe kind of situation happening because I know it's been years, right? That this is on repeat. It's almost like a cut and paste kind of response to things that we have seen previously where the tribe makes a decision and I think they've made the decision for the correct reason. And then they realize the next time around, they're like, crap, maybe we shouldn't have made that decision, that I think we should have done something differently. And I feel like we're going to be looking at the Yellow Tribe going back to tribal council. And I do think, unfortunately, that's going to leave Andy right back where he was before. And I think Andy's going to be going home. That's my pick.
I think I agree. I think God is going to lose again. I think but I don't think it will be Andy.
Okay.
I don't think it will be Andy. I feel like either Andy's going to find something or Andy's on a trajectory for someone who is. It's weird because I feel like we know there's two pairs between Sam and Sierra being viewed as a pair, and
Mm-hmm.
Rachel and Annika. So in my mind, I'm kind of thinking maybe I'm getting into like the edit a little too much. I think between the two pairs, Rachel was shown more between her and Annika, and then Sam was shown between him
Yeah.
and Sierra. So I'm like going back and forth between Annika and Sierra here on who I think, because I don't know. I don't think Andy's going. The logic would say he's going, but based on I think he's going to find something, or I think that someone like Sam or someone like Rachel is going to be like, you know what, I can use this. So I'm going back and
Interesting.
forth.
Yeah, I mean,
I gotta
that,
choose between
that
the
makes
two.
a lot of
I don't know.
sense if they recognize that they're in duos. And Jon also said to Sam, watch out for the women getting together. Then maybe it's Sam and Sierra pick him up.
Yeah.
You know?
So unfortunately, as much as I love her, I'm going to say Annika, just because if
Yeah.
Sam's the glue guy, is Rachel the glue
Call
girl and going to
himself the
hold on
glue
to her
guy.
girl?
Yeah, he did say the
I don't
glue
know.
guy.
Yeah.
I would guess Annika.
Okay.
I could be very wrong. Andy might be gone. It might be a very boring episode, and Andy might it might be a foregone conclusion.
I think if I had to pick between you two, Jake, I would side with your prediction. I just think I just think you're right. Sorry. And Jessica, we know how much you love doing predictions. So
I know that is fair. That is fair. I have a tendency to not pick correctly.
Yeah.
So congratulations, Andy. I guess you are not going home.
Yeah.
There we are.
Now Andy's going to go home. Andy's going home now.
Yeah.
These damn butterfly effects. I have to control these so much better. Gosh, I'm so sorry, Survivor players.
All right. Well, as we wrap up here, I want to encourage people to check out the RHAP patron program at robhaswebsite.com/patron. You can get access to all the special podcasts that are put out just for patrons, plus Facebook groups and Discord. So, you can help support shows like ours and everything on the network by becoming a patron at robhasawebsite.com/patron. Also, make sure you're subscribed to all of the RHAP Survivor podcasts by going to the newly updated and rebranded website, weknowsurvivor.com. So you go there, you'll see all the different podcasts. You can subscribe, according to whatever service you use, and you'll find all the great Survivor content there, like us, the Know-It-Alls, the B&B, Survivor International. There's a bunch of effing podcasters there. So with that,
I would like to thank some people. Yes.
Sure.
All right. All of those effing podcasters out there want to thank everyone at RHAP for the incredible work that they do. Yes, they know Survivor and they know reality TV like you don't even know. Scott St. Pierre, we really appreciate all of the editing that you create with all of the content that you put together. And Jessica Sterling, thank you too as well. Also producing, editing, and everyone at the RHAP staff and team that makes all of this possible. So we really do appreciate the work that you do. None of this would be possible without the people behind the scenes putting it together. So thank you so much.
That's right. We need effing producers and effing editors and effing graphic artists and all
of those people. That's right. And we also need people like, I don't know, effing guests. So thank you, Jake, for being here and joining us today. It's been such a great time getting to chat with you. I really appreciate your insight. Lovely, lovely time. And I hope to see you come back and join us again sometime.
Oh my God. Yeah, guys. Thank you so much for having me. I've never been called an effing guest before. I've been called an effing lawyer, but it's nice for the mix up. So thank you. But thank you guys for having me on. This was a lot of fun. I love the podcast. I hope no one gets voted out next week for their own sake. You know what I mean?
There you go.
Right. That'd be great. In a perfect world.
Yes. Thank you, Jake. It was a lot of fun. We enjoyed having you help us welcome Survivor back. Jessica, thanks for another great episode. Next week, we will welcome back returning guest Lindsay Carmine. And in the meantime, of course, watch for me and Ovi talking about Big Brother. We had one that was that we just finished yesterday. And so there was that Why Blank Lost. And then we have a double eviction coming up. So next week, next Friday, my day is going to consist of podcasts about 3 different people.
Wow.
And so, yeah, that'll be a lot of fun.
But you are an
So
effing podcaster, so deal with it.
that's right. That's right.
There you go.
All right. We will see everyone back here in a week. Thanks a lot. Bye.